Cash could feel the thump of horseshoes under his legs. He sat upon the saddle of his horse Diego, speeding like he could go a mile a minute. 3 cops, also on horseback, chased after him. They weren't far behind, and Cash's paranoia told him he felt their breath on the back of his neck. With a tree limb in hand, Cash swatted Diego's flank, keeping him up to speed. "Come on, boy, just a little faster," Cash mumbled under his breath. He spotted a decaying tree leaning over the dirt path. A smirk ran across his lips as he led Diego to the side, yelling, "Buck, Diego, buck!" Diego whinnied and kicked his back hooves hard against the trunk. Cash whipped the reins and got him back on track. He knew it wouldn't buy him much time. They could easily find a route through the trees, but it was worth a shot. Up ahead was a large wooden bridge. Across it stood over 100 people, all staring intently forward. Before them was a glorious castle, painted white and gold, with flower beds all around, posies, roses, daisies, tulips, and many others. A tall and wide staircase fell from beneath the massive doors. A red carpet with golden ends rolled down the stairs and onto the pathway. Cash's eyes took a minute to focus on everything before him. It was marvelous. Within seconds he shook himself out of wonder and bolted Diego towards a cluster of trees next to the castle. Cash hopped off his saddle and tied Diego to a trunk. Cash petted him reassuringly before walking over to the crowd in hopes of blending in. Luckily, nobody around paid him any attention. Cash followed their gaze up the steps, leading to a large man in a fluffy robe, belly bulging and smile glowing. By the crown on his head, Cash could only assume it was the king. He had to think for a minute before understanding it was King Lovelick. Cash heard voices over his shoulder and looked to see the police now off their horses questioning people. He squinted and thought of his plan. Cash saw that the king and another figure beside him were walking down the staircase. He knew everyone would be focusing on them, so he started to walk hastily to the back of the crowd before they could catch up. Though he was walking away, the voices seemed to get louder and louder, nearer and nearer. Cash didn't dare look back and risk of being noticed. His heart felt like it was leaping from his body, up and down, thump for thump. Behind him was a loud questioning exclamation. "Thief! There's a thief near! Oh, dear Mary, we must watch ourselves!" Cash couldn't help but start to lightly run and take temptation. He glanced over his shoulder. He saw an old woman in a large fluff dress. Her gloved hands covered her mouth in shock. Cash kept pushing through the crowd, seeing an opening up ahead. But before he could escape, clash! Cash bumped and fell to the ground. He could feel the lace runway below him. Rubbing his temple, he looked up. 2 green eyes stared back at him in curiosity. He felt a poke in his kneecap. He peeped down. Tilted beside him sat a crown, dainty and pure gold with a singular red diamond settled in one yellow column. This must be a princess. But when did King Lovelick have a daughter? Cash pondered. Nervously, he pulled himself up and got onto one knee. In respect, he picked up the crown and raised it to the girl's hands. "My apologies, Princess." He paused, doubting his memory. "Eleanor. My name is Eleanor," she mumbled, taking the crown onto her head. Cash could see the mystery in her stance. He may have disrespected her, even offended her, yet she still smiled back as if he had her in awe. Cash stood to his feet, bowed, gave her one last grin, and walked away. Now he knew all eyes were on him. He had to get out quick. When he escaped the crowd, he ran to the woodland side of the castle and untied Diego. Diego snorted towards him, like he knew what had happened. Cash just patted his rump and rode on. Overnight he slept under a bridge over a nearby stream. When he woke up in the morning, he set Diego's saddle up and headed to the market. He needed food and an easy escape route. Running kingdom to kingdom wasn't an easy job, especially on an empty stomach. He didn't have money, but he had persuasive skills. Trotting into the market, Diego's hooves scuffed up dust, making Cash cough. Cash looked around for an easy opening for connivery. There was a little girl in a frilly orange dress running a carrot basket. Her little voice boomed all it could just to get anybody's attention. Cash could have easily distracted her, petting Diego and braiding his mane, but he couldn't bring himself to it. He never could steal from children or elders. He didn't want to steal in the first place, and definitely couldn't steal from helpless people who had no chance. Soon enough there was a brawl up ahead, two men, vendors, arguing with swinging fists and griping mouths over stealing customers. Perfect chance. Cash hopped off of Diego, leaving him beside a fur-skin trolley. Cash went behind the vendor stands and got on all fours. He glanced around, making sure no one could notice him. He crawled over to a big table with apples, corn, berries, and carrots. He stuffed a few apples in his mangy jacket along with some blueberries. He turned around, grabbing 2 carrots for Diego, and crawled toddler style back to his steed. He slowly stood up, making sure no one saw him, and jumped back onto Diego. With a whip of the reins, Diego was off, hooves scuttering quick against the dirt. Cash held tightly to Diego's mane until he was able to find a peaceful spot below a tree. He sprung onto the grass and tied up his lively companion. Cash pulled out the carrots and laid them out for Diego. As he munched about, Cash got comfortable on the plush ground. As he picked blueberries one by one from his pocket, he thought about the day before. He kept imagining the beautiful maiden, how her short brown hair tucked behind her ears, and how her pupils seemed to glitter in the light. It was as if her eyes were freshly ground emeralds, promising discovery. She is beautiful, Cash thought. He felt a warming from his chest and quivering from his fingertips. It was only a moment. I'm not in love with her. I don't know her. His thoughts were rudely whisked away from the loud thudding of hooves in the distance. It startled Diego, making him whinny and buck. Cash got up to calm him down when he saw a set of 3 men bolting towards them. Police. Cash had to think quickly. He untied the reins and leapt onto Diego. Smack! Cash whipped Diego as hard as he could, sending them both into a startled gallop. He could hear the men yelling in the background, telling him to stop, calling him a thief. Cash knew they were right, but he couldn't be caught. Sweat beads drizzled down his forehead onto his cheeks. He could taste salt on his lips and licked it away nervously. They were getting closer, he knew it. The clopping of horseshoes was getting louder and louder. Faster! Go faster! Suddenly, Diego started kicking and neighing. Cash patted his neck in hopes of calming him down, but nothing worked. Confused, he looked around, searching for the cause of the reaction. A little white flash zoomed in the grass, round and round. A mouse. Soon enough, Cash was bucked completely off. He fell on his side, hitting his wrist hard. Laughter came around him. Trotting came to a stop. Cash looked up warily, defeated. The men grinned in victory and told him to stand. Cash lost his hope, stood up, and instantly put his hands behind his back. Just don't hurt my horse. Cash soon realized that being behind bars gives you a lot of time to think. He thought of his life's genesis and how he ended up where he was. He tried to keep an optimistic outlook, but it's hard when the robotic noise of slamming bars was surrounding him. He heard footsteps echoing down the hall, coming to a halt next to his cell. Cash looked up from doctoring his wrist. A man stood there, chuckling to himself. You've been wanted for a while, said the guard. Someone finally caught you, and now you're here. How does it feel? Cash just stared dead into his eyes, mute. Hatred poured from his sockets. The name's Seamus. Don't forget it. I'm the one who locked you up. Seamus gave him one last look through the wall that divided them, still smirking, and then walked away. Cash lied down on the cold floor, resting his head against the brick wall. He closed his eyes and let his worries drift off into slumber. Cash jerked awake at the sound of a shattering bottle. He walked up to his cell door and peered through the bars. 2 inmates down stood the princess, but she wasn't alone. A large man held her wrists, pressing them against the wall. Cash knew that face. He had just been there. It was Seamus. Tears streamed down Eleanor's face, but she remained silent. Now you listen to me, said Seamus. This is your last warning. I'm taking the throne with you as my queen. You better tell your father exactly that. Cash could see Eleanor's fingers trembling under his weight. He didn't know what to do. There wasn't a way out. He was locked. Cash watched the man put his face next to Eleanor's ear and whispered something quietly. "No!" Eleanor screamed and tried to push back, but it was hopeless. Seamus widened his eyes in disbelief. He grunted and pulled back a big hand only to swing it right at Eleanor's cheek. She screamed, and he hurriedly covered her mouth. Cash had to find a way out. She needed help. He didn't know any remote way to help. He searched the floor for anything. No keys, only dirt, leaves, and sticks scattered about. Then something caught his eye. A sharp, thin twig sat outside his cell door. Cash got onto his stomach and reached through. His fingers wrapped around the prize and he jerked it back. Cash looked down the hall, making sure the man wasn't watching. He only saw a big hand twined around Eleanor's throat. Cash stuck his hand to the outside of the door and pushed the twig in the lock. He twisted and pressed, listening for clicks and ticks. Finally, it unlocked. Cash slammed open the metal frame and busted through the entryway. Seamus whipped his head in confusion, furrowing his brows. "Let her go!" Cash yelled. "You'll make it easier for the both of us if you let her go this instant." "And just what do you think you're going to do?" Seamus pushed Eleanor to the side, sending her to the ground. He gave her a bulletproof look, letting her know not to make a sound. He pulled out a blade from his pocket. Cash grimaced. He didn't have anything to lose, but one chance to prove his life. So he ran. He sprinted full force into the man's chest, knocking him down. They rolled over stone tile, tossing and turning. Seamus pushed against Cash, aiming the dagger for his heart. But Cash kicked him off to the side. Cash swatted the knife away from him and grabbed it in midair. Seamus looked at him in shock. Cash stared at his heart, ready to push, but something took over him. He was a thief. He was not a murderer. Cash stabbed him in the leg and pulled the blade down his thigh. Seamus cried in agony, begging for forgiveness and help. Cash ran down to Eleanor, swept her into his arms, and ran for their lives. He skipped up steps, clutching the princess close, tears still streaming over her complexion. She hiccuped. When Cash reached the ballroom, he cried, "Help! Princess Eleanor is in danger! King Ulric!" Guards in shiny armor poured from the halls and stairways. From double doors up ahead, King Ulric busted through. Guards crowded around the two, screaming, "Escapee! The thief has escaped!" Cash let Eleanor to her feet, and she ran into her father's arms. He wrapped around her frail body protectively. "Guards, grab the thief and send him away!" the king cried, infuriated. "No, father! He helped me! He saved me! He saved me, father!" Eleanor spoke out. She ran over to Cash, clutching at his side. King Ulric cocked his head and raised an eyebrow. "He saved me," she said. The next week, Cash, Eleanor, and King Ulric sat at the castle's long dinner table. Guests from families all around gathered in congratulations. King Ulric stood, clinking his spoon onto his glass. "I would like to thank my new fellow, Cash Westland, for bringing my little girl to safety." The king started to toast. "He saved her, a brave man, and I could never thank him enough. He did also show us we need to watch our dungeons more." The guests laughed, and the king smiled, still looking down at Cash. "So here's to a new generation. Everyone, please welcome my new son-in-law, Cash Westland, your soon-to-be king." The crowd roared in joy of a new lifetime. Cash smiled to himself. As he looked over to Eleanor, pure happiness filled his eyes. He thought to himself, "I guess sometimes the dragon falls in love with the princess."